Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of the Drink and Draw Social Club. We're here tonight with a very exciting guest, Mr. Kevin Eastman, and, a little bit of Christmas cheer for all of us as we wind down the days into the holidays and get ready to have some excitement. So we hope you're happy to join us. We hope you have a good time. We're happy to be here. So,
are we really
doing this evening?
Are we really happy? You say that all the time, Ben.
Well, I got to say things like that. It's in the contract.
Right.
But nobody ever is happy, really.
I'm happy.
Dave, how are you this evening?
Hey, I'm doing all right.
You're
glowing.
A little blown out, with the light source. And
it's kind of like a filter. There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Radiant.
What is that big collection of tinfoil behind you on the wall? Is that a sculpture? What is that?
No, it's a painting, but it's got a weird thing over it.
Okay.
Or it's like a giant painting of a movie poster.
It's like a painting condom, it looks like.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. For that.
That's beautiful. How about you, Mr. Jeff?
Hi, everyone. How you doing?
That is a jaunty holiday hat you have there, sir.
It is. It's got a lot of Christmas spirit. You can tell, right?
It has all sorts of spirit.
Yep.
All sorts of holidays. What about you, Joe? Are you feeling festive?
Yeah. This is why I don't wear hats.
Lights up and everything. Nice.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Next one. Hold on. Sorry.
Now we're talking.
There we go. Lighting.
Sorry. Meant to have the lights up.
There you go. Fantastic.
That's incredible.
Isn't that great?
That's lovely.
All right.
How do we pronounce your name, Joe?
Kawabangasada.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's like it's spelled, Dan.
Yeah,
obviously.
There's nothing tricky.
No, Dan.
All right.
What's going on there?
Hey.
It's a very metal Christmas.
Look at that. I was close.
Everybody.
So, everybody's festive.
Oh, and you got a baseball. Nice.
Look at this.
There you go.
Wow.
Oh, nice. Sure.
It's like a Muppet on my head.
I clearly got the best one.
Yeah. So thank you, Ben. These came today. Ben sent us all,
including the shirts.
It's hard to make
a flag.
Green and red.
Me and Jeff.
Well, clearly I like two of you more than the other two of you. Yeah. And I kind of half like Jeff because he got his hat.
And you didn't say Kevin or get anything.
Kevin gets nothing.
Kevin does have a hat, though. That's important.
It's for his benefit.
So we didn't introduce our guest.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of did.
Oh.
Kevin, what are you drinking there?
What am I drinking, or Kevin?
Me? Kevin, what do you got there? Was that wine I saw? Oh. Cheers.
It's Christmas is a little warm, so it's like we're heading into the evening hour. So yes, I'm sort of easing into a little bit of wine. My lovely wife Courtney's cooking dinner, and Shane is putting together a Lego. And
nice. Legos rock. So Kevin, before we start, because I know these guys are going to inundate you with questions. So I want to fill folks in a little bit on our history, maybe stuff that you don't even know. Maybe you do know. But you and I met 22 years ago at Words and Pictures, your museum. And it was the one and only time. It was when we launched Marvel Knights, and it was the one and only time where every single creator on all 4 books was at one place for a massive signing. And it was phenomenal. One of the best times I've ever had. But I don't know if you know that. So I went there, and I'm like fully expecting and wanting to hate you. Did I tell you this?
Wanting to hate Kevin?
Wanting to hate because it's just one of those that you go there. Guy's infinitely successful. He at the time married to a penthouse pet. He's got this music. Oh man, this guy's got everything. And I just fell in love with you when we got there. It was like you were so gracious and so wonderful. and to this day, I tell the clowns on this stream this a bunch of times. To this day, the stuff that you and I talked about, because we hung out that evening. It was at a party. We hung out the next day, and you filled my head with so much knowledge about the industry that it became like a Bible for me. The stuff we talked about when I became editor in chief, because so many of the things you said were universally true about the industry, artists, we artists in general, and stuff like that. I want to thank you for that. I don't know if I've ever thanked you publicly, but I'm thanking you now because it was life changing, the stuff we talked about. So thank you.
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much. And I just want to say you were really drunk at the time, so I don't know what you remember. No, but I would just want to say that we reached out to you guys when I was building and putting together the Words and Pictures Museum with Fiona Russell was one of my art directors of the museum, and it was just a sort of trying to give back of all of our collective love to all things comics, and they should be shown in a museum setting. But you got you're the guy that brought all the Jimmy came up and Kevin came up, and you guys really put a showing on at the museum. It was one of my favorite all-time showings. You showed your support, and it was just a small thing in so many ways, but you guys, it was a big thing in so many ways, and it was really your support, because I think we all grew up standing on the shoulders of everybody that we love. And I'm stating an obvious point here, is that there were so many people that inspired us to get into this business, and you were pouring all of your love into the comics that you're doing, and it was just a phenomenal turnaround for our industry and things that you were doing. So it was pretty amazing that you did that for me and for us, and I to this day thank you. And we did have if you give me a glass of wine or two and I'll talk all night, and we did talk a lot about some really fun things, and I really appreciate that. So, and your support even after that was incredible, so thank you.
Oh, thank you, man. So all right, that's it. So now I'll leave it to these guys, because I know they've been dying to talk to you about stuff. So you've had a small career in the industry. You've done some stuff,
Little things here and there.
So I see two of you are drawing. Dave, are you drawing too?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let me I'll turn up. Click on somebody's camera and I'll read mine. Oh, it's so weird. There we go.
And we'll go to camera one. Dave readjusts.
Wow. What the heck is that?
That is our friends, the Turtles, having a little bit of pizza above the Renaissance Pizza Palace.
It's called Dan overcompensating for something.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Once again, Dan. Once again, you got to
It
show
all started years ago with Dave.
I'm actually going to do we haven't done a giveaway in 2 episodes, so I'm drawing some turtles, and one lucky fan will get it tonight. So,
wow.
And they'll also get the sketch.
Look how cute that is.
Sweet loving. That's what we're
The
gonna
first
get.
date.
Just don't send it UPS, Dave.
Yeah, jeez.
A lucky fan is getting it.
Yeah.
Nice.
And Jeff, a little shredder action.
Little shredder.
Curiously enough, that's what he calls his penis.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's pretty shredder.
Oh,
Or splinter, depending on the evening.
that's not right.
Yeah, no, it's 100% not right.
such a good family show for
Yeah.
solid
I
10
know.
minutes.
Kevin, you gonna draw tonight? You gonna do any drawing?
Kevin also sent me a bunch of.
I just,
It's okay, Kevin. Just talk over them because they're going to talk over you. It's,
Yeah.
there's no etiquette on this podcast.
No, it's so funny. It's like, and you guys can relate to this. I'm working on a new project with IDW. It's a project that Pete and I actually wrote in 1987, and I'm completing it now with my hero, my friend Tom Waltz. It's called The Last Ronin, and we're doing it. It's a 5-issue series. It's kind of our Dark Knighty version, homage to all the artists that I ripped off over all the years. And we're doing we're doing this thing called The Last Ronin, which is deeply passionate. It's a really important project to me. So, and Tom, so we're doing, but I've been drawing. So every day I'm drawing, I'm doing all the layouts, and Tom and I are doing all the writing. And I like, this is example of like so I'm doing, this book is like design after design and design. So I'm like literally everything I'm doing.
Oh, excellent.
Let's say like a great shot of New York City. So everything. So I'm drawing as long as I'm awake, and it is the greatest job ever. And it's one of those things that I tell you that, you know, I think we could probably all relate to this. However old we are, I get up every day and I work. I'm working on I'm working on a Phantom cover over here for a friend of mine. Still working on turtle stuff, but I get to draw every day, and that's just the greatest gift ever. But I'm also really late right now.
It's kind of part and parcel, right?
I know, it's like we're doing when I issued all these demands when I pitched this idea to the IDW of what I wanted to do. I said, you know, I want, you know, it's based on the original idea that Pete and I did, and Tom Waltz and I will adapt it. It's going to be 5 issues, 40 pages each. It's going to be oversized like the original Mirage black and white comics. And they said yes to everything, and then I was so shocked. Then I had to actually do the work, and but I have such a tremendous team of artists that I'm working with. I you know, I can do the layouts and I can do the storytelling the way I want it to be. Then I need somebody else to finish the work to make it look as cool as I'd like it to look. So that's what I've been drawing all day. So, and then and also it's like, I know we're going to talk about Corben tonight, but shit, man, that was pretty devastating news for all of us.
Yeah.
Did he work for Tundra?
I'm sorry?
Did he work for Tundra Press at all?
Tundra was Tundra actually did he did a couple projects for me, but it was just you know, Tundra was the greatest experiment of my life, and one of the coolest things I you know, I guess next to the Words and Pictures Museum that I did, and you know, but I know, you know, so Tundra was, the Tundra example is the Apple Records of comics. That wasn't supposed to be Apple Records of comics, but it was nothing I'm sad about or I regret, but I think I got to work with Corben a number of times over the years, including one of my favorite Corben pieces was I convinced him to do a painting for the reprint of Turtles issue 2. Which is the first time you see April with really big eyes, which was really great. And then the first color Turtle story that was ever done was published in Turtles issue 7, which was a 4-page story that I penciled and Corben inked, and then I tried to color it like he. He was.
What a great colorist he was.
Oh, are you kidding me? Jeez, you know, it's like I have so many books and so many things that I've read. I will tell you that I would guarantee, you know, and the point of betting money is that there's probably not a Corben book or thing that's ever been published that I do not have. He was one of those guys. You know, for me, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate. Well, maybe you can, but Kirby was the guy. For so many of us, and for me personally, growing up as you know, his sort of incredibly exaggerated and fantastical style and very dramatic style. I found Corben in 1977 when I bought the first issue of Heavy Metal. So I went from Kirby to Corben, and Corben's sort of exaggerated style just furthered the idea of opportunity and ways to tell stories outside of what we call mainstream comics, because all of my you know, I love, you know, like I still, you know, by the time Frank Miller came along in 1979, '80. It was just like he changed all of our worlds, you know, and that's what I love so much about, you know, Joe's early work and many of Joe's things, but certainly the Daredevil stuff was personal to me. But Corben was the second guy, and he was all my early submissions to companies for work were Ripoff Press and Last Gasp and underground companies that I still got rejection letters, but those were the guys I wanted to do work with. So in the Corben style. So
This is some stuff you sent me earlier, and when you sent it to me, I started going, wow, you were really. I see a lot of the influences in there with your work, and I'd never seen it before. But I didn't realize just how much underground stuff he had really done, because I always associate him with just you know, the heavy metal. So I thought, even though heavy metal is still a little underground, I thought, you know, it maybe I guess I just didn't put it together. So,
well, you know, it's you know, the thing is like it's all about you know, I'm an old guy, and but at the same time, you know, it's like I remember, you know, again finding you know, Corben through the early pages, you know, of heavy metal. I love some of that stuff. Some of his most fantastic work. Even like you look at Grimwit here.
yeah.
That was the first appearance of Dan, and I think that was 1972.
Look at that.
But there was
dragon or dinosaur. My God.
Oh, his textures are brilliant.
On the scales.
well, there was the thing about his work was you know, when I you know, grew up as a fan of mainstream comics, and at the time I was, you know, like a lot of you guys, I think I was probably growing out of mainstream comics, say in the mid '70s. You know, I discovered Heavy Metal magazine, which then led me to European comics and underground comics. I mean, the first issue of Heavy Metal had not only Corben but Von Bodie and, you know, numerous other, you know, it was sort of a great mixture of some of the top of the European artists that we love and adore so much, but a lot of American underground artists that have not found a portal to the mainstream comic. And that was the thing that changed my direction. And in only in the sense that, you know, we don't only have to do superhero or do more mainstream type of material, that you can tell any kind of story you want, you know, past, present, future, underground, however edgy, adult science fiction, those kind of things. And I got that both from not only so many underground comic books, but obviously so many of the European comics that we were republishing, or that were being republished at Heavy Metal at that time. So it was life changing. It was
yeah, look at even the logos are insane. That's so cool.
He drew. Yeah, he drew all that stuff. I actually have Up from the Deep is one of my favorites. As part of it was underground comics back in the early days. We're talking, you know, the early '70s, mostly. You know, we're supposed to be, you know, Robert Crumb and Zap and things, and drug humor and all this stuff. But most of Corben stories were either you know, anti-drug stories or environmental stories. And actually, this Fever Dream story, which I don't know if you guys know, that they did a Kickstarter recently where they actually did a Jan Chernat and Corben were raising money with Patton Oswalt as one of the voices. They were doing an animated feature based on this concept called character.
Oh, wow.
Within Fever Dream. They succeeded in raising the money, so they're producing it now. But no, I found a lot of my original, you know, besides my original exposure to Corben and heavy metal was, you know, Den and that kind of stuff. But then that was the gateway. And I lived in this really small town in Maine. Look at it. This is one of the first things I found. And this was most of the stuff I found after the fact, because I found this, there's a book done called The Odd Comic World of Richard Corben, which I found so much of his original material that was reproduced. And then years later, I went back, like probably all of us would do back in the days, go through the back bins looking for, you know, this, that, and the other thing back at, you know, even San Diego Con, which used to be more of a, you know, comic flea market with a lot of cool artists hanging out that actually drew those stories, was part of the thing. But that really directed a lot of the influence. In fact, it's funny, for what it's worth, and not bragging, but and I think in 1985, look at this stuff. This guy was in the early 70s. Oh, this is. I had to show the Neverwhere because that's my original copy when actually Ballantine and Ariel Books actually released it. This is my original copy. I read it so much it's literally, I have it sitting in front of me. It was literally falling apart.
Wow.
I was trying to trace and copy pages.
Yeah, as an artist, I was always trying to figure out how he did these backgrounds. I mean, it just those crazy. To this day, I still don't know how he did it. I know it's some kind of painting effect, but damn, it's so cool.
Well, there's, if you want to look at, because if you have about 26 hours, I'll definitely go through all this stuff with you because I love this shit. But no, there's actually a book. If you get to this, is a book called Flights into Fantasy, which is a book that I found in a bookstore. Actually, Pete Laird and I were hunting around. That was our favorite thing, is like going out and look for old bookstores when we live in Massachusetts and stuff. But there's it was published and written by a guy named Rashid Barusha, who ran Comics USA. It was a big fan of he was a European publisher and he published a lot of comics there, but he was a big Corben fan. But they actually go through here Corben's actual process of how he created all of those color stories for Creepy and Eerie back in the day in 1984. Remember those? It's like, because we love Creepy and Eerie. It was all, Tom Sutton and Bernie Wrightson and so many of those guys that were starting out with doing stuff for Creepy and Eerie, these great, horror and twisted, Twilight Zone style stories. But Corben came up with a way to actually create the separations himself to do these color pieces. So he'd do an 8-page section. So he would literally draw the black and white piece, and then through airbrush and ruby lith and whatever, you remember ruby lith, he would create the yellow plate, the blue plate,
Wow,
and the plate. And so he had worked out a way to shoot them individually and percentages, so that when you put them all together, he was creating his own printing plate. So he was not submitting color art that was then separated into those plates. He was creating the plates on himself to be built upon his original black and white art. And it's like somebody asking any of us, how do you create a rocket ship that'll go to the moon? But he came up with this technology, and that's how he was able to do all those color stories that we love so much, Mutant World, and all the Den stuff, and all those great creepy and eerie stories that we love so much. But that was, fantastic.
That's incredible. Where did he learn how to? Did he go to school for that, or did he learn how to do that all by himself?
He was self-taught. It's funny because I went over to his house once. I get to meet the man once, and it was probably worse than when I actually met Jack Kirby, because I couldn't speak because I was such a huge fan. But he was, we've been there. I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
But no, he was a designer and an animator, and so he just thought about things differently. And so when he would see a problem that had, certainly in the days of stuff that he was doing at Warren, when the technology for something like printing color comics was so expensive, he just figured out a way to do it on his own, and came up with this technology that was nobody ever knew. And I think that Jim Warren and other people, like, that's why it was never done beyond what Corben was doing originally and trying to do, because it was so fantastical and so outrageous. And so yeah, it was a complete it was an invention all within his own. And I guess that's one of the things that even when Corben got into he did lots of mechanical stuff, like some of the early comics that we saw and you posted. He would do some separations for and do some of his own coloring for before he got into the fully painted stuff. But a lot of it was when he actually got into computer with some of the later stories of later issues of Den, and even, right up until this most recent year, still stuff he was doing for Heavy Metal was a lot of was done between him and his daughter Beth, where they would do a lot of computer coloring and all this stuff right in their basement studio. It was pretty much a homespun, complete studio. Like I was watching Dan draw, and I just go like, I just love that so many people like I do everything still completely, pencil on paper, man, because it's like I don't know how to do it any other way, and I appreciate so much people that can draw from point one and put it on a pad and do some pretty fantastic things. But it's just yeah. Look at that. Oh, that's so good. That's awesome, Dan. You mentioned that earlier in your note. That was.
Do you even remember drawing it or not?
Yeah. No, it's like that was in those days. There was who knew who the Turtles were. So like when we do go to conventions, it's like Peter and I had our motivations were if we could sell enough sketches, then we could run around the convention and buy back issues of comics that we were missing from our collection, or this, that, or buy other art from other people. So we would draw all day.
What was funny about that was I went to a convention with one of my high school buddies, and I think I might have been sitting down at a table or something like that. I was that's the year I graduated high school. So he was a big Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan. And he ran into you, and he said, "Hey, can you ink this one?" He only had time to pencil it, and so I can't believe I inked it. I probably shouldn't have. I probably ruined the value of it, but
Yeah, you did.
Way to go, Dan.
Yeah, but
I love it. It's funny. It's like I love it. I think it looks great, and because it's like Daredevil was long before. Frank Miller came on board and blew us all away, after, Daredevil 158. It was like, but Daredevil was, one of my favorites. I liked Captain America, and especially the Al Buscema issues and the Gene Colan issues. And then with Daredevil, it was all about Gene Colan and Bob Brown and those guys and what Roger McKenzie was doing. And then Batman, of course. But it was like, so Daredevil was the shit to me. So, but no, I love that. In fact, I would I loved anytime they would print and Amazing Heroes or some of the other books that print pencils of anybody's artwork. I would like, we could have access to a photocopy machine. I would blow them up, and I would try to ink them and try to get work. I actually even did and I have it, and I still have the whole book that I finished. I should put out there I did the Marvel tryout book that John Romita Jr.
I remember that book. I tried
did it too.
Yeah.
I was like, this is it. This is my way in.
Hey, Kevin. So, can we talk a little bit about? I mean, you're probably sick of talking after all these years, but can we talk a little bit about the Turtles, about the origin of the Turtles, what you think attributed to its booming success, like literally just exploded everywhere. And it was. I remember it was during a few people actually talk about it. Remember the black and white craze.
Yeah.
But can you tell us? Clearly there was a Daredevil influence in there. Right? I mean that was always evident in a sort of parody kind of way, fun kind of way. But where did it come from? What how did you guys start that idea?
Well, it's a great. I would never tire of talking about it. And it's funny, you just reminded me of I remember one of the first meetings I had with Stan Lee, and he was a fan of the Turtles, and I had mentioned that there was a big element of the Daredevil origin story in the creation of the Turtles, and he's like, "Yeah, I almost sued you into another universe back then." But I didn't. You seem like couple of nice kids with a sincere thing, because we always try to pay our respects to the guys that inspire us. But no, in all sincerity, basically, Peter and I were Peter Laird and I had formed a studio, and we created a couple ideas, underground projects like Fusatoid and a few other things, and we're hardcore, super geeks and fans, and we didn't care if we were living out of a shopping cart. We'd draw comic books for a living, and so we made a lot of submissions to a lot of different possibilities, which led to a lot of rejection. But it was really guys like people like Dave Sim, feeding off, because I was a huge fan of underground comics, as I mentioned, with Corben and Bodie. But when I saw Dave Sim and what he was doing with Cerebus, it was fantastic. And of course, Wendy and Richard Pini with Elquest, and there was a lot of other, Flaming Carrot and those kind of things. And so this was the idea. It's like, well, let's follow sort of, I more modeled our approach on the Turtles after Dave Sim, where Dave did this Aardvark, this animal character that was sort of parodied after, Roy Thomas and Barry Smith's Conan. It was very funny, but it was very serious, and it was just, 2 color covers with a black and white interior. And so the more Pete and I talked about it, and I drew this was the first turtle ever drawn. And I said, what if we have this turtle? It's like he's a Bruce Lee character, nunchucks and all that stuff, that is the hero of the story. And that developed into a group of them, much like the Fantastic Four. And we sort of stole everything in that, Jack Kirby's Commandy, Frank Miller's Daredevil, New Mutants, everything we loved about all things comics, we kind of put in the blender and said, this is going to be a one-shot parody. And we did an early version of crowdfunding. We borrowed, $1,300 from my uncle Quentin, which was enough to print 3,000 copies and put one ad in the Comics Buyer's Guide. We all remember the Comics Buyer's Guide?
Oh, yeah.
To sell that, $1.50 per copy, 50 cents postage. And that premiered at a very small convention in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, in May 5th, 1984. We were so sure that we wouldn't sell any of the much more than a couple hundred copies of the 3,000 comics we produced, that we made furniture out of them. We had end tables with stacks of turtle #1s and coffee tables and stuff. But it started working. People started buying it. And it was just weird enough where people would pick it up and go, what the fuck is this? This was actually, it's funny. I love that you put up the gobbledygook here, because before we did Turtles, the big thing was mini comics. We did photocopied comics, and gobbledygook, this collection of short stories of stuff that Pete and I had created pre-Turtles, short stories, art galleries, that kind of stuff. And we photocopied them on 8.5 by 14 bits of paper, folded them over, stapled them, and that was our first cover.
Press, yeah.
Ash cans, right? Is that what they're called, Kevin? Ash cans? Yeah, those things were. I remember they were selling for huge amounts, depending on who had done it, and they were printed just as cheaply as possible.
Yeah, it was literally it was a photocopy shop down the street, and Heritage Russians just closed an auction on December 10th, and I think they sold the first gobbledygook for around $10,000, which is like,
wow,
are you kidding me? I wish I kept one of them.
Right.
But we all have those kind of beginnings. But basically, the Turtles really started as a one-off parody, and then we sold a lot of the first issues sooner than we thought, and then the second issue, and then it kind of I always tell people when I do like a convention, I'll do my presentation and slideshow and stuff, and I just say that when we solicited for and sold issue 2, that was really where the dream come true for both Peter and I, because we sold 15,000 copies, and we figured Peter and I, if we did 6 issues a year, that we could make enough money to pay our rent and eat and draw comics full time. So we, in our own minds, we were following in the footsteps of our Jack Kirby stuff. We were drawing comics full time. So that was 1985, and then I'm still drawing comics full time. So
Right. That's excellent.
Do you think this is kind of a weird question, but I mean, that's probably one of the greatest success stories of like an underground comic becoming, I mean, so mainstream that it's unworldly. But you, like, I imagine there's kids out there that are putting together a fanzine or something similar. Do you think there's still chances like that?
That's a really good question, because that was and it's something I get asked a lot, and I say the same thing. And besides, the drawing is absolutely gorgeous. I just want to digress for a second and just say that I spent the last 10 years working with IDW, and I've Tom Waltz and I worked on 100 issues of the Turtles, and my biggest inspiration was most of the artists that were drawing the series were half my age and draw better than I do. And they just would inspire me to step up my game. But I love that it has some kind of resonance with them as an inspiration. But I think that I do wonder, if the Turtles were introduced today, if they'd have the same opportunity. If it seemed to me there was so much of the right time at the right place with the right audience, and being receptive to an idea that was so kind of silly. I mean, honestly, when Pete and I went into the discussion and development on the Turtles cartoon series and the toy line, we really didn't think there was a chance in hell that it was going to go any further than a concept. We just it worked as a comic book, and we didn't really think it would go kind of beyond that. And and I guess that each time that we went through a different stage of the evolution of I guess the success of the Turtles, the acceptance of the Turtles, it was probably as amazing to us as it was to most of the rest of the people that were sort of viewing it from the other side. And so when you look back and go, well, was incredibly successful as an independent comic book, but so was I on a global basis with an audience basis, but it's also it's kind of it's a tough thing, because I like Fritz the Cat, and I like Nexus, and I like there's so many things that when we ended up in this position that we were in success, it wasn't until we were going to different places around the world and meeting fans that were not only inspired, which is incredibly humbling to people that would inspired to take martial arts or do that stuff, or draw or do whatever.
Wow.
It's quite humbling. It's like so like, look, what's the first thing I said to Jack Kirby, which between deep breaths of like, oh my God, you changed my life, and you're the guy that's responsible for me being a cartoonist, and you didn't know if he was scared or going like, well, I'm sorry, sorry to your parent. But I've had people say that to me, and that's a
great compliment.
That's a tough one. It's a great compliment, but you can't put yourself in that position of our mentors and the people that inspired us. You just don't. You can't go there. It's like, look, I get up and I draw every day. My drawing is a war. I win some days. It's a war I lose some days. And but at the same time, I wouldn't trade it for anything. So it's a great.
But it's like that thing, right? That, you think Kirby had any idea as he was drawing those pages, like, oh, this is going to change popular culture. This is, here's the first appearance of a character I've just done. Yeah, it was just a job, right? It was, but in retrospect, I'm sure he's aware of what he did.
Well, I flip that back on you, Joe, because I love it that you've met and you've worked with so many of those guys and so many of the amazing things that you've done in your career. Some of the stuff that, honestly, I did my first Marvel job. I did a Conan cover last year, which was,
cool.
The first Marvel job. I loved it, but it's like you were you were there and you are there. You're right in the middle of it. So it's like you've met some of these guys, and it's like, it's like I'm sure we could swap like Walt Simonson stories, or just I don't need guys that are just the coolest. Louise Simonson, Walt Simonson. I don't know, just people are the coolest people on earth that helped inspire us to be what we've become. It's hard, right? To sort of pay the compliments and not.
That is the wonderful thing about this industry. It's not 100%, but I'd say 98% of the people that you meet that were the people that you idolized are just the nicest people. I mean, it's a relatively humble industry, and there's the occasion where you meet somebody and go, well, that was kind of disappointing, but it's really, I find it very rare.
Look, don't bring up Frank Thierry. Come on.
Yeah. I've always strived to be one of those people that people go, wow, what a dick, but it's hard.
Kevin, what was if you don't mind me asking, what was the leap in popularity that was the biggest surprise to you? Was it the first cartoon, or the first live action movie, or the first video game? What was the thing you're like, there's no way it's going to go here?
No, great question. And it was the first one was the first cartoon show, because we did the first collaboration we had was with Playmates Toys at the development of the toys and the cartoon show. They only wanted to do a 5-part sort of mini series to introduce it, and they were, I commend them immensely for taking a big risk, because a lot of the people that we were working with, they really loved it, but they said this show doesn't have a chance in hell. Really, it's just so different. It's so out there. And so when we did the even I laugh because I was like, even when I told my mom, I said, we did this cartoon that's going to be on. It was a 5-part episode that was shown between Christmas 1987, that week vacation that kids had after Christmas, 87 into 88. And I said, yeah, we're doing this cartoon show. It's going to be on, Christmas break. And she thought I was on some kind of drugs or something. But when she saw it in the TV guide, she's like, oh my goodness, you're actually going to have a show on. And to all of us that were waiting, because, it was important to us that we had control of the characters, we had control of the story, we had control over the look, and that's the only way we would enter into any of these agreements, because we were all aware of the history of our giants, and that didn't participate in the creative opportunities or the profits from the thing. So, and we were making enough money to pay rent, so we were kind of cocky as well. So we just said, this is how we're going to do it. And so when that first series came out and it worked, we were pretty stunned. So by early January, they said, we're going to do another 8 episodes, which gave you essentially 13 episodes for a series. That's a great drawing, by the way. That's great, Dave.
That's great.
I love that. Actually, the 2012 Nickelodeon series is one of my absolute favorite series after the original series, of course. But I love what Cira Neely and all the guys at Nickelodeon did on that 2012 series. In fact, not to digress further, one of my favorite episodes I wrote for that was they wanted me to write this for the last season, which was a Tales of the Turtles episode. And I had just watched the night before, I'd watched Lone Wolf and Cub. And
excellent.
Said, we want you to do this cool thing. And I said, well, one of the number one things that we were asked in the Turtles history was, can you do turtle babies? Which we never did really. And something more about their origin. And so to me, I went right to Lone Wolf and Cub, and I put this called Lone Rat and Cubs. So it's like Splinter pushing 4 baby turtles that have just been freshly mutated around in the shopping cart, and we were attacking them. But I love that series. The 2012 animated series is absolutely fantastic. But back to the question is that was sort of who did?
Steve Jones. You met him at an Emerald City Con years and years ago. You guys talked about it. Worked on that show. It's crazy. It's a great show.
really good series. And so, but that was the first animated series was the one that we even going to, I tell this story as one of my slideshow things where when the first toys came out in 1988, June of 1988, Pete and I went down to KB Toys, which was down in Springfield, which is the first, that was pre-Toys R Us. That was the big chain. And so we went down because we heard the toys were actually in stores. And so we kind of walking through the store, and as we're getting close to the action figure aisle, we have this mom dragging her son out of the action figure aisle going, "No, I'm not buying you one of those stupid Ninja Turtle toys." And so Pete and I were just like, so from then on, we were pretty much taken aback by the reception of the characters as a whole. So, because it's a ludicrous idea and it's a ludicrous.
I hope they sent you toys. I mean, you didn't have to go down and buy your own toys, did you?
No. Playmates has been, even to this day, they still send me toys, and they, it's I don't, I haven't owned a part of the Turtles in probably 10 years or more. But Playmates and even Nicola, I still consult on the movies. I still work on the animated shows, and of course, my heart is always in the comic stuff. So when IDW had picked up the rights to do the comic books, I went back to work just doing comics with them and Tom and all the guys down there, which is, we just finished, we did 100 issues. I mean, Tom Waltz, is one of those guys that nobody knows who he is, but he wrote 100 issues of the Turtles, and we put out issue 100 in December of last year. And that's pretty commendable. I often put, in my mind at least, I put Tom in the same places that we put, say, Walt Simonson on Thor, where we love the original Kirby series and all that, but we felt that a lot of Walt stuff was kind of definitive Thor, I guess. And to me, what Tom did with the Turtles is definitive Turtles. I set aside again Eastman and Laird, and also Kirby and Lee on the original Thor, but it was a pretty amazing series.
Hey Kevin, there's a question I want to ask you, because I remember that during the heyday of Turtles, like you couldn't throw a rock without hitting some sort of turtle product, a toy, or whatever it may be. Yeah. So what was there something? I don't know how much approval you had. Was there something that was so unbelievably ludicrous and stupid that you were like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to license that out, because the world is filled with those ideas.
No, that's great. And actually, it's funny. It's like not to, but Pete and I insisted on from the very beginning with our agent Mark Friedman, who helped take the thing out. And it's sort of like the way the Turtles were rolled out back in the day. It was it's kind of similar. Like we've all heard the stories of what George Lucas did with Star Wars, in the sense that he said, well, you can do this, but I want to keep all the merchandising rights, which is a deal that will happen in Hollywood ever again. And for the Turtles, we were in full control, and because of some of the early success of nothing to do with the comics. The comics, even though they sold. It wasn't until it became a cartoon show that we oversaw completely. We had full approval over treatments and final screenplays and designs, and I mean, it was Pete's idea to come up with a different mask for the Turtles and that kind of stuff. It was so we had complete control. Same with the movies and that kind of stuff. So when it came into licensing, there was some stuff that we would just like, turtle pajamas, really, or this, that, and the other thing. But I think there was only a few things that actually one of the things that was actually licensed that I thought was the grossest thing ever was like you remember the old moon pies or something like that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Right.
Half a thing with fruit filling with frosting. So they actually did a turtle one that had not only green filling, but it was kind of green custard, but it also had green frosting on it, and just so wrong. But I had to be careful to mention that, because I'd be doing a slideshow at a convention. I go, hey, remember those? And people go like, I love those. And I'm like, well, yeah.
It's so good for you.
But I think the only thing that, our licensing, because Mark, our licensing agent, would bring everything to us and say the turtle condoms and turtle yarmulkes, I think, were flatly refused. We just
they went there, huh? Nice.
You changed, but one of the things. But that was one of the things we went like, no, that's probably not.
Yeah.
Right.
Did they make shredder condoms? Because
for her protection, for her pleasure.
Shredder.
No, but it was one of those things that I remember going to the first time I'd never been to Paris before, and huge fan of art and art history, and that's where we borrowed the turtles' names from. But I remember the first time I went to Paris was to go to one of the turtle movie premieres, and that was just wrong in the sense that I'm looking at the Eiffel Tower and seeing an ad for the turtles on a kind of one of those round pavilions that they had. Just felt incredibly out of place. So you have the moments that stand out in your mind. You go like, big WTF, going like, what the?
What do you think
That's the first time you went. That's hilarious.
So what do you think it was about the turtles that was able to make that leap to become so popular and beloved? Do you think it was the relationship between the brothers? Do you think it was just sort of like they were just fun, or it was just so silly that it really struck people's funny bones?
No, I think it's I think it was all of the above, in the sense that nothing that Peter and I did was original in the sense of you look at the Fantastic Four as a scenario, or the X-Men, or any other superhero group that we were fans of. You would have different personalities with different strengths and different attitudes, and they would bicker like a family, but when they all joined together, they would succeed as a family. So that was an aspect that we played off strongly. I think it was that, in addition to the mutant aspect, which again is nothing wholly original to what we did with the turtles, because that was a prevalent and an important factor in all comics that were being done. But I think it was that one of the things might have been, and I say might have been because we're not 100% sure, but you think of like there were 4 green mutant turtles, so we didn't alienate anybody. So I've had people of every race, creed, and color and opportunity come through our line, and the fact that they weren't designated as a specific kind of person or stereotype, that they could identify with them. So they would say, that's one of my favorite questions to ask is, who's your favorite turtle and why? And you can tell a lot about the person standing in front of you. It's like, well, I started out, I was a huge fan of Raphael, or I was a huge fan of Michelangelo because I was kind of a class clown, or I was a silly one. But as I got older, I became more like Leonardo or something. But I think it was a combination of, the misfits, mutant family, no social, racial identity, but the camaraderie is like, so, I've worked in coffee shops, I've worked in pizza places, and I've worked in places where sometimes the people you work with and the people you're around become your adoptive family. So I think there was that part of the relationship. So it's hard. It's like, to tell. And, one of my favorite lines was, when I was a kid, it was, nobody could tell me what I thought was cool and what wasn't. I decided. And so I think, probably speaking for all of us, we were the same way. It's like we saw something we liked, and we liked it because we liked it. And you couldn't say why, you just did. And but I think, you break it down to sort of those elements that you might discuss with your therapist. I think that was the turtle.
I think a lot of it, had to do. Well, first of all, the name was a grabber, right? Because the name is like, okay, this is just bizarre. This is over the top. This just seems kind of. But then when people actually got into the property, into the IP, and whether it was the comic book, whether it was the animated show, oh, this has heart, this has a story, this has characters, like you said, characters that you could relate to in one way or another. And I think that was the trick. The thing is that you baited them in with that title, but then the story was really just a story about friends, about a family.
Kind of like us, though.
What was that?
A little bit like us, the Drink and Drug gang.
Yeah, exactly like us. We all have our distinct jobs on this show.
But you're right. But you think about it, it's the same thing that we loved about Peter Parker or Daredevil or Captain America or anything. It's like once you could, however it was presented, however you grafted onto it, once you found the heart of the story of the character, that Indiana Jones, and once you found that spot, then that's what worked.
And then they kick ass. You know what I mean? So it's it was, but I'm saying it's just that the kicking ass part, and any good comic that is probably the least important part, right? It's establishing those relationships, and especially if you're dealing with a book that's about family, about friends, right? It's the best fantastic. When you think about, you and I are from that same area. When you think about the best Fantastic Four moments, right? Is it really the Ben Grimm punch, or is it them sitting around making breakfast, them sitting around in the Baxter Building doing?
Well, that's like that Barry Windsor Smith story for Fanfare. I mean, It's such a great story. It's just a goofy, fun story.
Yep.
Was that the one where Storm has set up this elaborate thing to play a trick on Ben Grimm? Is that the?
Yeah, it's supposed to be April Fool's, and they got the day wrong or something.
That was, dude. It's like that's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, I love that one.
But it is. You're so right. It's like it's moments like that that I think it's like and I forget which sweet
little Corben action there.
Oh, that is awesome.
But, you got me. All right, yeah. Do a little heavy metal, cover. So
that's so awesome.
It ain't gonna be done today, but
I don't know which Avengers movie it was, but it's the one where they end up with the movie with someone. It's either running over credits or just after credits, where they're all sitting around the taco shop eating something.
Oh, yeah,
the shawarma. Yeah,
shawarma. Yeah,
yeah, that's a great moment.
Yeah, I know. I think that's the best part of like having, folks like Joe and so many other people that grew up on that material that are putting the importance of those kind of moments into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and those kind of things, because, to me, it's like that to me is just the shit. It's like, it's like we have a 14-year-old son, and we watched every single one of those in the Star Wars movies. He won't read any of the comics, and one end of our house to the other is like literally filled with every comic I had since I was 9 years old. He won't read those, but he knows everything about the Marvel universe. But it's those moments are just that was it.
Yeah, I got a weird going back to the early days of the Turtles. I remember, because of the craze you guys kind of started. How did you feel about all the ripoff books, like the Shogun Hamster,
Space Beaver?
I mean, it seemed like there were all these ripoff books that were trying to cash in on 4-word titled, like hamsters with cerebral palsy, Shogun.
That was my favorite.
But I remember when you were coming out, and I was just like, man, I wonder what these guys think about all this. So now I can ask.
Yeah, no, it's a great
time, Dave. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, the thing is, it's like when Pete and I looked at, or when you look at Peter and I's inspiration and history as far as the evolution of the Turtles, it really was built off not only all things mainstream comic books, but it was the evolution of the late 60s, early 70s of underground comic books and self-publishing to I mean, even Cerebus, I think, came out in 1976. So it was sort of like, that was right in our radar. I was just getting out of, I didn't graduate high school until 1980. But it was just sort of the collective, like, all my first submissions went to, Marvel and DC, and ultimately, you get those. You usually wouldn't hear anything, but occasionally you get a note of going like, "Yeah, no, not so much." So I feel like the opportunities were few, and when I found Underground Comics, I thought the opportunities were far. And so when we did the self-publishing route, it was a way for us to get into the business that we loved, and we wanted nothing more than to draw comic books. That was it. That was the main goal. And so when we did it and it started and it worked for us, that was epic. So when you saw a lot of those people that came in, what they call there's a lot of people blame the Turtles for the black and white boom and bust, which happened from 85 to relatively short, 85, 86, 87. But I think late 85, you had probably about 15 to 20 adjective, noun sort of characters. Adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters, which was one of my favorites. Mildly microwave prepubescent gophers, kung fu kangaroos. There was so many of them, but I felt like on the one hand, there were some of those artists that I think actually just wanted the same thing that Peter and I wanted, which is they actually wanted to be a cartoonist. They wanted to draw comics for a living, but then there was a lot of them that was evident that they were just out there to make a buck. And I think by the end of 86, the number one black and white comics were selling 100,000 copies, which was like which was crazy, but not as crazy when by the time we got into our whole color, the image boom and bust, where people were selling 1 million copies. I remember talking to Jim Lee and John Nee at Wobstrom, and they didn't even go to press on books that were selling less than 1 million copies, which was like, what?
That's bananas.
So we took it as an homage. Our book, which was a parody, was heavily inspired by everything we loved about comic books. So it was sort of it's a nice way of saying we ripped off all of our favorite ideas and published a book on our own. But then I think a lot of people, there were people that were sincere that wanted the same thing, a career in drawing comic books, and some people that just wanted to make a buck. And they're not here, and we are for some reason, which is amazing.
Yeah, my first published work was my comic book store owner, a guy named Cliff Biggers, who went on to make Comic Shop News.
Yep.
We got in on the tail end of the black and white market boom, and they did a book called After Apocalypse, which Mark Bagley drew, and it was right before he won the Marvel tryout thing. So he drew it, I inked it, and then the black and white market boom collapsed, and that was it. And then it was like years later before I got any work from anybody really. So, but I was still young, so it didn't matter. I mean, I didn't care.
Well, it's you're right.
You're not blaming Kevin.
Yes, I'm blaming Kevin.
No, it's funny. I remember, and I can't remember the year specific, but it's like, but I remember going to an event at San Diego Comic-Con where Will Eisner was the keynote speaker. And it's one of the things I think it was probably after the color boom and bust, where they sold 7 million copies of Deathless Superman, and just people were investing. You had all these collectors come in, and when they realized they would be having these hugely valuable comic books that they could sell later on to put the kids through college and all that kind of stuff, the market had a bit of a bust. But it was a kind of a super tough year, maybe the second of a super tough year in comic books. And I just remember Eisner going, look, I've been in this business since the beginning. I've seen the comic book industry die and be reborn 6 times. And he said, this convention in particular is all I hear from retailers and publishers and artists is how bad the industry is and how crowded the aisles at the convention are. So it's sort of a great thing to say, like, the industry sucks, but look, the place is fucking packed. Yeah, so.
That's the thing. I mean, you've been here in the industry for a long time. I've often said, have you ever met an industry that's so happy to predict its own demise? I mean, year after year, right? It's always, even during boom years, right? Oh my God. Well, yeah, we're doing well, but it's all going to collapse in a minute. It's like,
right.
Just enjoy it.
Pre-Marvel nights, Marvel was done. It was done. It was over. It was gone. That was the end of all things Marvel. They were going to be like, Roger Corben was going to produce all these. It was done. It was over. And then you go like, you have this, these amazingly gifted artists come in and put their favorite parts of characters that they love and grew up with and put everything they loved about them and find a new path. Even like, look, when they invited me to come back in on with IDW on the new Turtle series, I'm like, look, I worked on 300 cartoon episodes and movies and comics, and I said, I can't imagine where you can go from here. I just don't know what you could tap into to come up with something as interesting as a story. And along comes guys like Tom Waltz and Bobby Curnow and the artists, and then like I said, most of the artists that I met were like, they still weren't shaving completely. They were just, but they could draw better than I could. But their passion was fantastic. So it is sort of like and right now we're in that same position. We had to state the obvious is like we've all had a pretty tough year, but at the same time it's comics are still selling and fans are still following us online. They're joining these podcasts and they're supporting us, or whether it be Kickstarters, which are or Indiegogos or those kind of things, which are phenomenal for I've got a new project called Drawing Blood that me and my buddy David Avalone created, which is set in the world of comic books, and it's a project we put out as a Kickstarter event. We own and control all of it. To different stuff we're doing for licensed things, but it's like we're still keeping we're drawing for a living, and that's it. So there's always a means to the end. It's scary because I remember it's funny, I was talking to Simon Bisley recently. I love Simon. I've known Simon for most of my life, but I remember like sometime in the middle of our relationship, probably going back 10 plus years ago, business wasn't that good, and we were just sort of like, well, what do we do if we don't have comics to draw? And we went into this elaborate discussion about how awesome we will be as homeless people. Like, we'd have souped up shopping carts with like knobby tires and things. So we got this like a whole thing because we didn't know how to do anything else. It's like, where we can dig ditches or work in restaurants and stuff, but we're going to be comic book people.
Most of us can't do ditches either, though.
So I've great hope for the future. I think we're going to be.
It's going to be interesting to see when things do come back, how the convention scene comes back. If it comes back as just a reboot of what it was, or if you see kind of a renaissance of the smaller shows. It's going to be coming back to it, however it comes back, and being gathered in a place with that many people. But
I think it's going to take some time, But I think it's going to come back faster than we think, But the question then is, how many shows survive, right? They were before this all started, we were probably on the cusp of way too many. There was a show every weekend, and so it just felt like it was reaching,
critical mass,
absolute critical mass, but who knows? It was, they're all seem to be making money, but I think, We'll see. We'll see. But I think people are craving to get back to normal in one sense or another. So my money is on it'll happen.
No,
It'll happen faster than we think.
I agree.
Hey, Kevin,
I think
Go ahead, Kim.
I was going to say, you were there during the black and white boom, and you've had a really long and varied career, and so you've seen a lot of different kinds of storytelling and a lot of different industries. What do you think that there's a similar phenomenon happening now with digital comics to the black and white boom, or is it different?
No, I think it's. I call it, I'll say this. It's not a means to the end, but it is going to kind of. It is that. It's sort of like a, that's the best and cheapest and most opportunity you can look at to really to reach a larger audience and just stumbling here for a minute because I feel like like when we did Turtles issue 1 in 1984, there was only the direct comic market. We had there was no internet, cell phone, or any none of that stuff. Obviously, it was the direct comic market and the CGB and Comics Buyer's Guide, and then a few other things that. It was all word of mouth, and that's what worked. But now I feel like, and I talked to that a lot of young fans that come up and want to discuss, well, how do I get into the business, and how can I, get to be the person behind the table like you are? And I said, well, it's different. The world is completely different now, but there are lots of opportunities. Not only between Facebook and social media groups and DeviantArt and comics. Art.org, and it's so many ways you can build a community around a concept and a project before you go to press, that you can build an audience before you actually do the physical thing. And these days, most people prefer, not most people, let me correct that, but a lot of people prefer digital versions of comics. So it's sort of, I feel like it's just like we're sort of on that seesaw kind of thing where the collector mentality of having the physical copies, which is the love and passion of holding it and reading it like you would a book or those kind of things. And the other people that are strictly digital and they want to experience it in that way and stuff. So it's sort of, the direction still has a bit of a question mark at the end of it. But it is interesting to see what becomes of it. But also I feel like, what everybody's doing here as we're talking and speaking, the physical art of drawing and doing some of these things is just the appreciation of that. I don't think ever goes away. I think it's a fantastic rivet to the industry. Is like people still want to see the physicality and know whether you're using a Wacom tablet or you're using, I'm still a paper completely.
So you don't use any digital at all? You're 100% paper?
100% paper, yeah. Like I do. My most expensive technological tool is a light table. No, and actually I used to do like all those years of penciling out comics and penciling the comics and then inking them, then erasing them, then losing half your inks by erasing all of these pencils and all the stuff. And then I started doing some work in animation, and then everybody was doing light tables. So even 99% of the work I do is all to size with thumbnails, and I'll blow it up, and then I'll light table it for finishes, and so it's sort of quick.
Hey, Kev, can you tell us a little bit about the project you're actually drawing right now, what the story's about, or is that a bit of a secret?
No, it's like the main story I'm working on right now is it's called The Last Ronin, and it was based on an idea when Peter and I were by late '86, heading into early '87. We'd finished Turtles issues 1 through 11, and it was sort of I guess what we call the foundation of the Turtle universe, which is the first 15 issues, 4 one-shots featuring each of the individual turtles, and then the first 11 issues. And then we were sort of thinking, well, where do we want to go from here? And one of us threw out the idea, said, well, let's look 30 years down the road and see where they end up, and then we'll kind of use that and write towards that. And this is pre everything, pre toys, pre all that stuff. So we wrote this story that was set 30 years in the future, which was set in 2017, which is crazy. And so the next year, Playmates and toys and so many of everything sort of came into play. And so the idea was shelved, and it was really just that. Now was it? It never came back to the surface again. And so, similarly, when about a year before Tom Waltz and I were in late 2018, we were looking towards heading towards issue 100, which came out in December of 2019. We said, well, where do we want to go afterwards? And I just kind of jokingly said, well, I have this story concept that Peter and I wrote under the same kind of circumstances in 1987, and why don't we come up with an idea that's set 15, 20 years in the future, and kind of go there and see where it takes us. And so we used that 1987 story as a springboard into what became the last Ronin. So and when I presented it back to IDW and Nickelodeon, who owns the property, I just said, we've just worked on 100 issues, and we want to go someplace that we have never gone in all the Turtle universes, but leaning heavily on the Mirage universe. But I want 5 issues, 40 pages each, oversized, kind of like what Pete and I did in the original series, and have freedom to get pretty heavy-handed on the content. And they said, yeah. And so that's what we're working on now. So the first issue came out, and it was one of those I lost my lead artist. I do the layouts. Tom and I write the story together, and I do all the layouts like I used to do back in the Mirage days. And Andy Kuhn joined us initially, and then just had to step away for personal reasons, which I love Andy. He's still one of my favorite artists. And so when we found a couple of new guys, actually guys that had worked with me at Heavy Metal, called the Escorza Brothers, Isaac and Esau, and they've drawn stuff for me at Heavy Metal, and they came on board as the main series artist. And then my buddy Ben Bishop, who we're working on Drawing Blood with, he's doing some of the flashbacks. So it's kind of like a little Dark Knight, a little year one sort of put into this mishmash of what we're doing. And so we got a late start. So issue 1 came out in October, where I was working on issue 2. We're almost done. It's going to come out in January. We're bi-monthly for 3, 4, and 5 after that. So, but it's been received really well, and we're grateful for our fans supporting this idea.
Good times.
Awesome.
You dig it. You check it out. I continue. Yeah.
I noticed you have your sketchbook there with a bunch of stuff in it. Can you give us any previews? Can you flip through it at all?
I'm trying to. I was thinking about that earlier, but I don't want to get murdered. Just because it was some of the ideas. Here's a good one. It's thinking of designs for the first cover was sort of based on some
super cool.
Bill Sienkiewicz's Unforgiven sketches. You remember that from that series?
Right.
And then because, we released at the end of the series that it was Michelangelo. No spoilers here. It's been out for a while. It's like Michelangelo was the last Ronin. So there was I'll break down the designs of what he looks like. And then that sort of evolved into this kind of stuff. And I've always done this in some of this stuff, which is this is equipment.
Awesome.
So
It reminds me of Mike Golden would always break down everything. Every character would have that.
I love Golden. He's one of those guys that it's just an artist. I don't know. He's just and so this comes to this is sort of arrived at the final concept of kind of what he looks like.
Sweet.
Neat.
because that's what we did with like the first cover you see, which is the cover of the sketchbook. Is I wanted you to show like that. He's got all the weapons, and so we didn't want you to know who the last Ronin was until you get to the end of the issue. So you see here like Raphael's sai and Leonardo's sword and the Donatello's staff and Michelangelo's nunchucks, so we can sort of leave that. But throughout the rest of the series, there's a lot of designs for covers. This is actually that's the cover of issue 3.
Let's see. Well, that's cool.
It's kind of like looks like a Death of Superman a little bit.
Mhm.
A lot. But I did a lot of the. Actually, I'll show you one of the. My favorite thing was always designing like sets. So I'd be like I always like doing city scenes. And so this is like one of the set pieces.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I love that stuff too. Yeah, it's badass.
Yeah, but Kevin does it well, Dan.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, he's a bit of a show off.
Oh,
so.
no, the same. It's like to me, it was always like when we think about like there's great Kirby 2-page spreads, or even what all the amazing things that so many artists Miller. It's like until you have the setting of where the story takes place, it really is hard to go all the way in. So that was, to me, that always resonated in such a big way, is that that the sets have to be there, and they have to be like actually, I'll show you. You get a kick out of that, especially you guys in New York. See if I can find it really quick. Because my big thing was it's a futuristic New York, and I have so many drawings. Here's you get a kick out of this. So here's futuristic New York. I see this. So after the flood, so they built a wall around the city because of global warming. But it's like putting all the heights of all the different buildings and how this all sets in the city.
Excellent.
Okay. Which it's almost like it's like if you're designing a fight scene or anything you're doing, it's like you want to build the environment that the whole thing's taking place in, so that if you're choreographing everything you want to do, it's
absolutely. Well, you have to have your different levels and your different places for the scenes to take place and how they affect the action. All that stuff needs planning.
Yeah.
Sure. Care.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's key. You got to care, Dan.
That's stuff.
I'm taking notes.
Yeah, Dan. I don't know.
Trying.
It's always a problem, Dan.
Yeah.
Kevin, it sounds like you really still love drawing. That's really good to hear, because sometimes it's easy to get lost in the stress of deadlines and the pressure of creating. But I always come back to the fact that I just like to draw.
That's such a good point. And the thing is, like, I always loved to draw, but it was, to me, it was always and I never stopped it. And even like, to me, it was always a bit of a war. When you would imagine in your brain that you could draw like Barry Smith, and then your drawings don't look anything like Barry Smith or Jack Kirby.
It happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
So by the time even when I was especially when I was publishing full on publisher of heavy metal, the kinds of material that would come through and the stuff that I would select for publication, these guys were just so phenomenal and so exquisitely talented, and you could just never. I just don't have the ability, and I'm not putting myself down. The reality is, it's like I can draw what I can draw, but that's kind of it. So when you look at somebody, and we all do, we look at the appreciation of other artists that have the skills and the chops and the stuff that we appreciate it so much. So I a lot of times that I would do material that I do storyboards for, like I worked with Bisley a lot, and with mixed results. I would do, layouts and storyboards, but I'd board it and sort of choreograph the story. Certainly with Bisley, the most ADHD guy I've ever met. He's fantastic, but if I could keep, and it was hard to keep him on track, but he would always make me look really good. But no, I didn't know what I'd do if I couldn't draw every day. And actually, when I went back to work full on drawing, like drawing covers and things for publications specifically, it was relearning how to draw and do finished work. I'd done, a number of stories, a number of graphic novels for IDW, but it was a relearning process, and it is, in all reality, and it's not self-depreciation. I'm not putting myself down. It's the reality is it's like I love doing it, but it's like my drawing is what my drawing is. So if you like it, thanks. If you don't, well, I'm sorry. That's all I can do.
Did you? Kevin, when you went from the world of, being a creator and drawing, coming up with the stories, to then running a business and being an editor and soliciting work and getting other people's artwork, did it change your perspective on how you viewed art and your appreciation for it? I ask because mine changed completely once I sort of went to the other side of the table. But I'm curious to see what you think.
Well, it's the hard part was there were a number of challenges, and one of them was a lot of the artists that I was working with forgot that I was an artist, and so they would tell me the same lies that I would tell other people.
Yeah.
Right? How many grandmothers can die? Right?
Yes, it's like it's all done. Yes, it's like no, but it was there were challenges, and it's like becoming a business person was more of a business person. It was just something I wasn't that good at, and that I sort of wanted people to do have the same faith and have the same drive that I had, and not everybody was in that position, and then there were just guys like, look, it's like I've worked with guys, and I'll just name Simon Bisley because that's an experience I had with extensive experience with doing stuff, and I'd send him material and I'd send him stuff, and he'd turn stuff in that was below what I expected, and so when you had to go back to somebody that's your friend and you have to go, dude, this ain't working, you have to fix it, and then put up some kind of argument of, I'm like, well, that's what I want to do it, and I was like, well, I appreciate that, but that
seems like a tough job wrangling Simon Bisley.
I tried to outdrink him a few times.
Oh God, good luck.
Terrible idea.
It's a bit of a joke, but no, he would have discussions, and ultimately it's like when you sort of really press him, he's a great person, is a really great person inside Simon, outside of all the things that he's done in his career of disinformation and lying or whatever or deadline. But when you push him hard on certain things, he would always step up, and he was always we get along. But it's tough. But I think that when I experiences like Tundra and other things were just some of that stuff was pretty tough. Getting people to step up to what they committed to, and I don't fault them. It's just like you either do or you don't. It's like we always say, or what I like is do or do not. There is no try. As Master Yoda was, it's like you do it or you don't. Fuck it if you don't. And it's like, well, all I know is like these days, if I want to pay rent or if I want to, if I want to keep working, then I do the late nighters and I work. And when we finish talking tonight, I've got a couple pages to wrap up for guys that are waiting for layouts for me for work they're doing tomorrow. And I'm not complaining. That's the greatest.
That's impressive. Hey, so apart from Bisley, you've had a lot of guys draw the turtles over the years. Is there a standout that you just loved and they did it in a way that you were surprised by and liked, or who do you think was your favorite guy?
It's there's a number of them because one of the things that I always liked about even some of the early years at Mirage is that we would have, besides the stuff that Peter and I did, there were artists that would come on with an idea and a style that we liked what they wanted to tell as far as the story went, and we let them go. But to be honest, it was Richard Corben did an issue of Turtles 33 that was one of my favorite all-time stories. He did it with Jan Strenard, and that was fantastic. I've done Body Count with Simon Bisley, which was, John Woo meets the Turtles, which was fantastic. I worked with Mark Bodie on a couple stories. I was a huge fan of Von Bodie. We did a couple stories together, but there was just a great element of different variety of material done in those early days. But carrying forward to the IDW series, there's so many fantastic. Dan Duncan was the first artist that did the first 12 issues, and we started in 2011 with the IDW series, and then
he's great.
He's fantastic, and oh man, it's like names just are flying out of my head. There's so many guys that have come on that have done such wonderful material. Mateus Santupolo, who's done fantastic issue after issue of the series. So it's the IDW series is, again, I feel like an amazingly talented group of guys and girls that have come on and done stories. Sophie Campbell, who's doing the most recent Turtle series, is just mind-blowing. Cool. I get the cover for the most recent issue 113, which is coming out early next year, which is so no, it's like, and that's the inspirational stuff.
It's weird how many people have worked on it. I mean, I've done like so much advertising artwork for the Turtles over the years too. It's just you've given so many people jobs and takes. There's different takes on it, different versions of them, and it's amazing.
Wow. We can't get to an episode without a humble brag from Dan.
Well, I have to put it in, Kevin. Part of my drinking to a contract.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, but that's the thing is like what's so different, what's so bizarre, I guess. That's not the right word I'm looking for, but it's sort of like I grew up wanting to draw Marvel comics. I wanted to draw Daredevil and or DC, Batman and Captain America and all that stuff. And along comes another group of people that grew up on those Turtles issues came out in the mid '80s, and so we have guys and girls that have come on and said, you're the reason I started drawing, which is like top of your head explodes, and you go like, what? But it's that thing. It's like I'm great to see the work. It inspires me, and I'm thrilled.
Hey, before we
forget, do we have any reader questions? Do we have any viewer questions?
Yeah. Do we have any viewers?
Well,
we have any viewers? That's actually a great question.
I say, do we have any viewers? Because I'm getting the evil eye from my wife at this point. She's like,
oh yeah, well, you've given us plenty of time. We've gone way over our standard.
No. Honestly, it's like you guys want to do this again anytime? I'd be here for the next 2 hours easily.
Well, that would be actually really cool.
Hey, before we leave, we need to do a trivia question for at least the one I'm doing. I don't know about Jeff's, but I came up with a question. So the first person to list the color associated with each character on the Turtles gets this drawing.
Can I win?
No, no, Jeff.
So the first person to get them right. So Kevin,
Let's see the drawing. Hold on. Let's focus on that.
I hope you're watching the chat because I honestly, I think I know, but
I have the answer right here. I know actually what it is. I want that drawing.
I bet Kevin knows.
Yeah, I hope so.
You guys are all sitting there like,
You're like, oh, who would know?
if only we had a reference.
Well,
all right. Well, I think we got our first answer. Michelangelo orange, Leo blue, Donnie purple, and Raphael red. Is that right?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, we got a winner.
All right.
This guy, M. Curry.
Way to go, M. Curry.
Yeah, M. Curry. Steeler.
So, hey, M. Curry, DM me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram with your address, and I'll send it out.
Or his OnlyFans account. You can hit him up there too.
Yeah, my OnlyFans. Yeah.
Naughty.
Yeah.
listen. So yeah, next time have me back, and I'll actually draw this time because I actually.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
So I remember when I only attended one drink and draw event in LA, and that was at Meltdown Comic Books. There was
When
that was good.
Susan was there.
they did the back room, and everybody was there, and I missed a lot of things, but I bought the drink and draw book that you guys put out and some other stuff, and
Oh, that's so
I was a big fan of Dave's art for forever.
fun.
But no, it's like I'd love to come back and chat with you guys. So they do, it's fun stuff, and I feel like we're all at least putting myself first and foremost. I'm one of the old guys that I have more useless information for anybody else but us.
Yeah, I love hearing about the Corben stuff too. I'd love to
Yeah.
talk more about the underground comics. Just that stuff you sent. I hadn't seen a lot of that, and I'd love to. It's just such an influence on so many things that people don't realize how it creeps in there.
Mm-hmm.
hey, Kevin, I have to
Absolutely.
send you a copy of this piece. I did it a while ago, but I don't know if you can go to my screen or not.
There you go.
Awesome.
Ooh,
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Was that? What'd you
It's a
do that
commission.
for?
It's a commission I did years ago.
Oh,
So,
dude.
but,
That's
those turtles are hard to draw. They're
they're
hard.
really hard.
Yeah, they're
You
tricky.
know what? The hardest part is actually getting the shell to work in space. You know what I mean?
Yep.
For me, at least, that was the hardest thing.
Turtles.
no. It's like I've got a.
Thierry comic.
Like I said, Corben did an issue of a painted cover for Turtles issue 2 reprint, which is on the wall over there, and I got a few other things. But it's like he did the same thing where he had like and I'll show you next time. But it's like the shells were almost detached from the body inside, so it was sort of like they were wearing it. It's like almost like if you were one of us, but wearing a turtle shell
Right.
strap on. It just didn't. Everything fit weird, and
Right.
so we just made it, oh dude, we just made it up.
Right.
I remember actually, if you notice, all the early Turtles comics Turtles had tails, which we had so many comments of people going like, so are those their penises? You see all the most recent.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah, the Toys That Made Us show. I assume you had some participation in that. The Netflix thing. The Toys That Made Us that was on Netflix.
Yeah, so before you ask your question, so here's what I think about the Toys That Made Us.
Uh-oh.
And I only say this because we had there was a company, these two French awesome three guys from Montreal that did a documentary called Turtle Power, and they spent 5 years of their own money, and they interviewed fans and directors and voice actors and everything. So, and it's a really wonderful, definitive and accurate history of the Turtles. So, Toys That Made Us. Day one, interview one, I sat down with them. They wanted to do this thing, and I love the Toys That Made Us. I watched it on Netflix, and so they go, "So, Mr. Eastman, you're from Springvale, Maine, And I said, nope, I don't even know where Springvale, Maine is. I said, I'm from Portland, Maine. And I said, it's funny. And this is what I told the guy. Literally, I said, somebody on my Wikipedia page, back when they started Wikipedia, wrote that I was from Springvale, Maine. And I went on Wikipedia and I tried to change it so many times that Wikipedia actually blocked me from changing my hometown from Springvale to Portland. I said, so it's really funny. I don't even know where Springvale is, but I'm not from Springvale. I'm from Portland. So the opening of the Toys That Made Us starts with Kevin Eastman from Springvale, Maine.
Oops.
Then they sort of went through the whole thing, but it was not even so much that. It was there's a guy in particular, one of my good friends, a guy named John Handy, who was one of the main designers of all turtle toys from day one. Him and Ronin were thing. And so they did this thing where they showed, here's John Handy, one of the early designers, and they showed 2 drawings that he did, and they cut away from him, and they said we had to bring in somebody better to fix John's designs. And the thing was, the guy that came in was an addition to John's, but we worked with John for 12 years. But they would do these things where they go so they made it sound like John Handy was fired after 2 drawings. And there was a lot of stuff like that where you just go it's like it reminded me of the first time Peter and I did a interview with People magazine. They spent 2 days interviewing us and 2 days doing photographs, and they did 3 pages, and 90% of the facts were wrong. It was just completely incorrect. So I felt bad, because then I felt bad about all the other Toys That Made Us episodes that I liked. I wondered how incorrect.
How bad are they? Yeah.
So it's sort of kind of a bummer.
Man,
and they made it
bummer, because I like that series.
And they even go hey, we're getting Peter and Kevin back together again for the first time in decades. And it's like, I talked to Peter. And we were in the the turtle documentary. We went back to 2015. We went back to the original house that we created the turtles in, which was since been what do they call it? It was torn down, and so there was a vacant lot. So we stood in the vacant lot and said, well, that was a studio there. That was just like a couple years before we taped Toys That Made Us, but they just spun it in a different way, which was kind of a bummer for everybody. But people said they cried when they saw Pete and I get back together, and we were kind of laughing because well, I talked to you last week. I guess that made people emotional. That's good. But we have so many great fans. I don't want to belittle or take anything away from that, because that was okay. But some was pretty silly.
So what you're saying is, for future professionals, they should just start lying about themselves from day one, and then it won't matter.
Start lying now. The bigger
right? Yeah, get it going.
Dan's been doing that for years. So
eventually it becomes canon.
Yeah.
That's my whole MO.
Yeah, but only one person falls for it.
Yeah, it's me. I'm a sucker. I can't help myself.
Poor Jeff.
Well, listen, guys, I want to wish you guys an absolutely wonderful holiday. 2020 has been an interesting year, and I'm glad you guys are all here. We're all chatting safe and sound. Looking forward to us getting through the early part of next year, but I wish you the most sincere and safest holiday for you and your friends and family. And, one of you mentioned earlier about getting back out into conventions, and I know it'll happen at some point. And I look forward to us doing one of my favorite things where we can have that beer at the bar after the show's over and swap a few war stories. And
That's the best.
That would be awesome. And yeah, you're welcome back anytime. We'd love to have you. So we'll let you get back to your family.
Thank you.
And thanks again.
Thanks, Kevin. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas. We really had a great time talking.
This is our last show for the
year.
year.
Show 2020.
Yeah.
Way to close it out.
Going out with a bang.
We will see. We'll see everyone in January, right?
That's it. Next
That's right.
year.
Maybe.
All right. Take care, everybody out there. Thanks for joining us tonight.
People.
Yeah.
Thanks again. It was